The Bengals 2024 NFL Draft is in the books, and how did they do? Trevor Sikkema of Pro Football Focus is here to break it all down.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi again, everyone, and welcome in to the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm James Erpine. I'll be joined by Jake Lisco and Trevor Sikkema, Pro Football Focus, will join us coming up in just a second to talk all things Bengals draft. Today's show is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and it is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. And as always, thank you so much for making us your first listen. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube, follow wherever you get your podcasts. And without further ado, let's get to Trevor Sikkema on all things Bengals draft.
Let's chat with Trevor Sikkema, PFF's lead draft analyst and co-host of the NFL Stock Exchange podcast, about this Bengals draft class. And Trevor, it's a B+ for you. I noticed with the PFF post-draft grades for every team. But one question in addition to the grade is, where do you rank it? If you had to put it top third, middle third, bottom third of NFL draft classes this year, where I heard you guys talking in your live show that it seems like NFL teams aren't making a ton of extremely crazy decisions this year. Do you think that B+ puts them in the top third of the NFL in draft classes this year?
Yeah, I would say top third for sure. And honestly, B+ might be kind of harsh on my end because the only pick I really didn't love was the McKinley Jackson selection. I get it. I know what they were going for. It was just a big time reach for where he was ranked on my board. But so many other picks that this team had. I mean, the Amarius Mims selection, I think it's a perfect landing spot for him. Love them getting Kris Jenkins Jr. to really improve that interior defensive line after losing out on Reader. Jermaine Burton could be the X factor of the entire draft, honestly, and what he could mean for Cincinnati, both short and long term. I love Erick All. He's my tight end 3 in this class. I really like Josh Newton coming into the season. Struggled a little bit last year, but I still like him as a player. Cedric Johnson, I see the athletic upside too. So this draft was great, I think. So honestly, like just hearing that out loud, and when you ask it to like, oh, where does this rank? In my head immediately, I was like, I mean, top 10 probably. Like, 8, 9, 10, something like that. But that B+ label might even be a little harsh if I was comparing it to what grades I gave other teams just because of the McKinley Jackson pick. But I really did like Cincinnati's draft a lot.
Amarius Mims was obviously their first selection, and going with the big tackle, given Joe Burrow and given the fact that they want to protect him. I think a lot of people are on board with the philosophy of it, but there are plenty of people in town specifically that are looking at those 8 starts that look at a guy that had the hamstring at the combine and the ankle injury this past year. Mm-hmm. How risky of a pick is it? How concerned should Bengals fans be? Obviously, we all know about the upside at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's worth bringing up, right? I mean, injuries they're tricky, right? Because even if you have a guy who has been injured quite a bit, as long as the injuries aren't chronic, like unless it's something where, okay, yeah, like medically we can see you're really weakening your body in this area. You're highly prone to injuring this again. Like outside of these chronic injuries, it's just a violent game. It's just a fast game. It's just one where you're just going to get hurt all the time. So, with Mims, yeah, he hasn't played a ton of football in this past year. The ankle injury was a big reason why, but the years before that, the reason why he wasn't starting is just because Georgia's an incredible football program. So he really couldn't get on the field. So yeah, okay, he has this past year as a starter and he goes through the injury. Obviously the hamstring injury is not great either, but if you get him into the NFL with a really good strength and conditioning coach that understands the body limitations and how hard we need to push him in the offseason, what we need to do for maintenance during the season, like I don't look at Amarius Mims and think this is an injury prone player. Like this is a risk in terms of health. The only real questions that I have with Mims is if you were to start him year 1, week 1, the technique's not really there the way that it needs to be to go up against NFL pass rushers. They're going to be able to set him up really well. I think the hand usage, especially against the guys that are much more seasoned in this league, they're going to be able to bait his hands and really swipe the hands away and really just not allow him to get those long arms on him without really causing those fouls. So to me, the big question with Mims is simply the fact that if you're going to start him right away, you might have to go through some growing pains, but that's why Cincinnati to me is the perfect spot. You got Orlando Brown Jr., you signed Trenton Brown, and now Mims does not have to start right away. You can really groom him. And heck, even if he starts the second half of his rookie season, I think that that's a better scenario because you're going to get a guy who's going to be ready, going to be hungry to get that out there on the field. I mean, he almost transferred from Georgia because he's like, I'm not playing here. And they basically had to convince him like, hey, your time is coming. We invested this in you. We wanted you to come to Georgia. Your time is coming. Please stay here. And he did. And obviously, I think that when he was on the field, he looked really great, even going back to that 2022 season at the end of the year when he had to fill in. So this is somebody who, when he gets to Cincinnati, I think that he's going to have that same sort of hunger to be like, okay, like I'm ready to play. And I think that's only going to increase his desire to get to that point and get on the field and be a contributing player for this football team.
And the feet and pass protection to me, Trevor, look like a real strength to his game. It looks like he's a natural mirrorer. He has natural pass protection ability. You see him occasionally overset, lose across his face, guys breaking inside. I think there's maybe one rep in the Tennessee game. James Pierce, next year's projected first-round pick, gets him on an inside move. But that Ohio State game, his first start, I believe, in the college football playoff in 2022, I mean, it's shutdown stuff. And sometimes in the run game, he looks a little bit lost, like he maybe isn't sure what his job is supposed to be. To me, that looked like the biggest question for him. But the pass protection, production, and consistency, to me, was really impressive for a guy who didn't have a ton of time, who seems pretty aware. And you're talking about hand usage. Is that something that is consistent? Is that on inside moves for you? Or was that something that you think is just something that needs to come along?
Yeah, first of all, James Pierce Jr. gets everybody with the inside move. So I wouldn't be too concerned about that. I think he's going to be a top 15 pick next year because of how great of a speed rusher that he is. But yeah, I think that you brought up some really good points. I think the footwork is good. I think the feet are fast, especially for a guy who's 340 pounds. I mean, that's the alluring part, right? Normally when you get offensive linemen that are above 325, 330, you're sacrificing something. You go, okay, they're a little bit better. They've got the power profile to them, but the feet are just naturally going to be more heavy because you're dealing with more weight up top. But Mims, it feels like he moves like a 305, 310 pounder with those feet, and he's sitting here weighing in at 340. So I think that in that regard, he's already further ahead of where you would want him to be. But yeah, you talk about, okay, sometimes he sets up the inside shoulder to get attacked a little bit too easily. But to me, he has the body type to be able to make up for it. And it's just a time thing for him, right? It's just about anticipating a little bit better, making sure that, okay, let me see what this guy's doing. Let me understand what his pass rush plan is. And I can understand, okay, this is when he typically goes inside and he can be ready for it because the recovery athleticism, and again, the recovery length is just so ideal from him. And you're right. Okay. Run game, he's still kind of understanding that a little bit better, but that speaks to the lack of snaps to me, right? Those two areas of his game where you say, realistically, he just has not played enough football to anticipate inside counters as well as he would need to, or hand placement as well as he needs to, which you got to remember this too. When you have longer arms, it's without a question an advantage, but it also requires you to be even more technically sound and understand your body really well, because if not, then you just become this like hugger of an offensive lineman where, okay, the hands are coming up and they're coming wide and they're going to the shoulder pads. And now all of a sudden you're giving up your chest. You're allowing guys to dip underneath your shoulders. You're susceptible to holding calls because it's really easy to see for officials to see if you're like hanging onto the shoulder pads or anything like that. So, when you have those longer arms, it's great, but they've got to be compact. They've got to be ready. They've got to be up and they've got to be quick and precise. So these are all things that just get better when he gets more snaps. So the areas where Mims has those deficiencies, to me, speak just much more towards lack of play time than any sort of lack of ability, which is why I love this landing spot the most, because you get to ease him in. You get to get that confidence. You get him to, again, I say this again, but I really believe it. Be hungry to be a starter, be motivated to be a starter. And I think you're going to get a really good product whenever it is that he becomes that starter for this team.
Today's show is brought to you by Monopoly Go. Monopoly Go is the game you need because, well, Monopoly Go is perfect for you, me, anybody else who's competitive, who wants to play a game with friends that they can pick up and put down at any time. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with your favorite people on the planet to, well, have time tournaments, whether you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And it's anything from unique stickers where you can trade with friends to complete big albums for prizes, or maybe you want to unlock different travel pieces to play on unique boards, hilarious emojis to taunt friends, whether you want to win, whether you want to compete, or whether you want to team up to win. Monopoly Go has something for everyone. It feels new and exciting with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. There's also new timed events that let you win big, like massive multipliers. There's something fun for everyone to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and get into the game right now. Download it for free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. I think that's certainly something a lot of people are hoping for with Mims as he develops into a starter. Expectations for their second round pick and Kris Jenkins might not be starting level right away, but it's certainly instant contributor. You mentioned that you really like that pick. What do you like so much?
Well, I like the fact that, I mean, he is just such a pound for pound, really strong football player. I mean, they call him the mutant from Michigan, and it's just because of the athletic ability that he has. Now, you know, he's not built like his dad. He's not 6'5", 350 pounds, but he's got a lot of that DNA strength to him still. So even the pound for pound version of strength that we are getting here from Kris Jenkins Jr. is going to be plenty adequate for this team. And I think the Bengals are really at their best when they have that force and that strength up front in the middle. And losing Reader is tough. You know, that was a big cornerstone of what they did along the defensive line. It allowed them to get a lot of one-on-ones with the edge rushers. It allowed them to send a lot of blitzes from the linebacker level because they knew they were covered up well, because they knew that those guys in the middle were covering their gaps and not letting anything get in between them or get around them or really get pushed too far back off the line of scrimmage. Now, obviously, with Jenkins being a little bit lighter of a player, that might naturally happen a little bit more. But even at Michigan, when you saw him, when he was asked to take on double teams, you know, he could really execute a good corkscrew technique, really bringing his knee to the ground and holding the line of scrimmage against two really talented offensive linemen that maybe were trying to execute a duo block or a combo block on him and just get to that second level. And he would be able to hold those guys long enough to keep the linebackers free, to get to their spot, to disrupt things, to where, okay, maybe you're not making the tackle at the line of scrimmage, but maybe it's only a 2-yard gain instead of a 5, 6, 7-yard gain, and asking the safeties to get involved from depth. So to me, I wish that Kris Jenkins would have developed a little bit more as a pass rusher this year. That was ultimately our hope for him. That was what we saw as the thing that held the key to him potentially being a first-round pick. But to me, the second round was always the floor for him because he's just such a steady presence in the middle as that defensive lineman there. And I think he's going to be able to contribute right away. Maybe not a full starting role, but a contributing role right away as a rotational player in his rookie season.
Steve Palazzolo called him one of the best playmakers in the run game in this class. Obviously had a very, very high PFF run stop rate. When you talk about the pass rush ability, what kind of upside do you see there? Is that more of a product of the role he was in at Michigan, playing on a very talented defensive line and an NFL-style defense with Harbaugh, or is that more of a product of the individual player where he needs to develop a pass rush plan and pass rush moves?
Yeah, I think it's more of the latter. Like if he had the opportunity to be more of a pass rusher at Michigan, I think they would have given him those chances. We just didn't really see him be put in those opportunities very much. I think it's just because it's not his game right now. And so there are plenty of things where even if Jenkins isn't the most finesse, 3-technique defensive pass rusher out there, I think that there's still room to grow for him as a pass rusher. You know, getting better at those bull rushes, getting better at those, you know, stack and shed opportunities to really be able to get in the backfield. He is explosive too. So being able to understand, okay, this is how the offensive line is setting up. This is how they like to slant. When they like to slant, let me try to get myself in between this gap, really get into the backfield. That to me are opportunities for him to make plays behind the line of scrimmage. But, you know, it just, I should say, like, the timing of his pass rush moves, it's not like Johnny Newton, right? And I know I'm bringing up somebody that Bengals fan was wanted to be on the team, so I'm sorry about that. But like Johnny Newton is just like a karate master with his hands sometimes.
Right.
I mean, it's just so hard for this guy to stay blocked because of how well he is using his hands. And Jenkins just didn't have that approach really. Like you can tell he said to himself, I am getting my hands up and inside. I am going to make sure that I have control of the guy in front of me, and then we'll see what happens after that. Instead, you have other three technique players, like not just Johnny Newton, but like a Braden Fisk as well. Like he's another example of these are guys who just say, I am going to get past you as fast as I can, no matter what. And it's just kind of a different mindset. So I wonder if there will maybe be more of a push for them to say, hey, let's, we know that you can shoot your hands inside and you can get control of the guys in front of you pretty well, but let's see if we can increase that hand speed and really keep you off blocks more over the next couple of years to develop your pass rush profile out for you to be a 3-down defensive lineman at all times. And we're just thinking that you could be a high impact player. Because you mentioned it. He's already a really good run defender. It's just, what more does he have in the tank? Second round pick, like I said, was always the floor for him. Is there more to say, man, in a couple of years, we will look back at this one and we go, what a steal the Kris Jenkins Jr. pick was.
Trevor, I know we're going to ask you about the tight ends, and I almost skipped, but I don't think we can skip the Burton pick because it's such a surprise, I think, in the moment for a lot of people here. It certainly surprised me. The first two picks didn't. This one did. But it seems to fit like a glove. What do you think about his game, particularly in this Bengals offense with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and company?
Yeah, I mean, look, Jermaine Burton was one of the most talented wide receivers in the class. He really was. And I think that a lot of analysts kind of came to the same conclusion is, we've kind of been told from different sources that a little bit of a hothead, maybe a little tough to control, kind of marches by the beat of his own drum. And because of that, we're teams going to draft him. I'm going to be honest with you. I had a second round grade on him on tape. Could have been even higher. Could have been like an early second, maybe even late first on him. I know there's some people who had him as one of their top 5 receivers in this class. He wasn't at high for me, but man, he is somebody who I think could be a major impact player. He played at Georgia. He played at Alabama. He was impactful at both. The way that he get off the line of scrimmage with so much speed and precision and body control, and the strength that he has at the catch point, despite being a little bit smaller, his ability to just stop on a dime and really like hit a comeback or just a post route or like an over route over the middle just to create that separation. I mean, he really brings you everything that you want in a player of his size. And it sets up a potentially elite wide receiver trio with Chase, with Higgins, and now with Jermaine Burton here for the 2024 season. And genuinely, this move for Cincinnati could give them the flexibility to move on from T. Higgins if they want to. And so there's a world where if Burton plays really, really well this upcoming season, or you could just tell that he's gelling well, he's got a good chemistry with Joe Burrow, he's a productive player, they might look at next season and say, okay, we can afford to let T. Higgins walk because we know that we've got a really good 1-2 combo anyways. And then you could bring in another veteran wide receiver if you want. You could draft another one if you want. And so you could reload in that ability, in that way. So the Bengals, to me, those first 3 picks that they had were so great at supplementing their current situation. It was a great combination of both improving the team in the short term, but also building it long term. I was so impressed with what they were able to do for these first 3 picks. And who knows exactly what's going to happen with Burton, but all I can tell you is that when that dude's on the field, he's a force and he's an incredibly talented wide receiver. So as long as he is on the field and he is a contributing member of this team, they're going to get good return on investments from him. I already saw that in his tape over the last couple of years.
Today's show is also brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is a one-stop shop for all things sports wagering, including NBA playoffs, NHL playoffs. In the NBA, well, the Knicks, they had it. They had him, and they let him off the hook. Tyrese Maxey and the 76ers escape Game 5, escape New York with a victory, and will they be able to win 2 more and shock the New York Knicks, eliminate the Knicks? I didn't think it was a conversation. Now it is. Will the Magic be able to rebound after losing by 1 point at the Cavaliers? Will the Bucks continue to rally after losing Giannis Antetokounmpo and Damian Lillard to injuries? They won Game 5 to extend that series against the Pacers. You can wager on all of those things with FanDuel. And right now, you get $150 in bonus bets with signing up right now with FanDuel. That's right. New customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's it. So throw $5 on the team you think is going to win, or a prop bet that you're bullish on. Boom. When you win, you're going to get $150 in bonus bets to use on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
I don't know if you saw the video of Zach Taylor's reaction after they got the pick in. Like, he's slamming his chair. He's as excited as I've ever seen Zach Taylor in the draft room. So he's stoked to get Burton in there. And the Bengals have been pretty good at drafting receivers too. Another reason to, I think, potentially be bullish on Burton. I have two questions for you as a follow-up. One, do you do player comps, NFL comps? And if so, do you have one for Burton? And two, Steve Smith called Burton a vertical receiver. Isn't so sure that the rest of his game is ready for the NFL yet. Where are you on how he would be best used at the next level?
So I didn't have a good comp on him. I was late on doing comps this year and just didn't really have time to get a lot of them in for the draft guide. So I don't have a good comp for you. I wish I did. But to Steve Smith's point, yes, Burton is more of a vertical wide receiver right now. Like we saw that again at Alabama. We saw it at Georgia. His average depth of target is really high. So a lot of what he did, they were just sending him long. And I can understand the reason for it. He's really quick. The acceleration is great. His releases are lightning fast. So if anybody's playing against him in press coverage, he's got the hand usage and he's got the releases and the good footwork to be able to get even with these players very, very quickly. And then it allows the quarterback to give him a shot deep down the field, most notably towards the sideline, because he has that speed and that athletic ability to do it. So you can understand where Steve Smith is coming from with saying, hey, he is a vertical receiver right now, because that's a lot of what he did in college. But the way that he is able to stop on a dime, the way he is able to control his body, to sink his hips, to chop his feet, to flip the hips over, like that all gives me a lot of encouragement that if you put any route in front of this guy, he's going to be able to do it. He's going to be able to do it crisply and create that separation. So yes, he is more of a vertical wide receiver right now, but I think there is so much more in the tank for him to become a well-rounded, can run the whole route tree type of a guy.
Trevor, let's switch gears. Let's talk about these tight ends. Stick with the offense. And you mentioned it earlier in the show. It certainly got my attention. Erick All was your third tight end. And I'm not going to compare this tight end class to last year. Certainly, it's a weaker tight end class. But the fact that he was your third tight end, I think is interesting for sure. What are the Bengals getting with Erick All?
If Erick All is healthy, this is a starting caliber tight end at the NFL level. He played a little bit for Michigan. He was in a crowded tight end room. 2022, he played the beginning of the season. Then he ended up having to have back surgery. So he missed most of that entire 2022 season. Transfers over to Iowa for his final year of eligibility and only played in, I believe it was 6 or 7 games for Iowa before tearing his ACL. So admittedly, not great, right? I mean, like these are two major injuries for the game of football when you have a back injury that you're recovering from, and then obviously a major knee injury. So the health is a reason why I think he would have been drafted around where he did, somewhere in the early parts of day 3. But on the field, this is an impactful tight end. Truly, like this is somebody who, again, I think can do whatever you want to do from the tight end position. I think he's a really good receiver. I think he's got the ability to run a lot of different routes. We saw him be able to tempo his routes when he was at Iowa. Heck, he only played 6 or 7 games for Iowa, and he still led the team in receiving at the end of the year. Now, maybe that's more of an Iowa stat than an Erick All stat, but they were not afraid to get this guy involved because they knew the return on investment was there for him. I think to go along with his good receiving ability, he is a really nice blocker as well. He is somebody who I think you could put in inline situations, wingback situations, as a fullback out of the backfield, but also as a slot receiver as well. So to me, I saw a lot of what you would want to see from Erick All in terms of a potential starting tight end at the next level. So as long as he is healthy, and it might take a little bit for him to get fully confident again coming off that knee injury, I really do think that this is a really good long-term option for them and a potential starter.
At what point can we start scouting the helmet with Iowa tight ends?
No, 3 years ago. Yeah. I mean, they truly are tight end you at this point, because they also have another guy who I liked as well this year, who also got hurt, Luke Lachey, who is going to be one of the best tight end prospects in next year's draft as well. So they're growing them on trees out there.
The fact that you're able to produce in an Iowa offense, period, as a tight end, you mentioned it's a product of the Iowa offense. Probably yes, but that's probably a good sign that he was able to be productive in that offense. Unfortunately, the injury, of course, cutting short his season. And who knows what happens if he's healthy the whole year as a productive Iowa tight end. We've seen what those guys have done at the next level. Any Tanner McLaughlin thoughts? Is this a guy that can be a supplementary piece, a good pass catcher? He's 25 years old, coming into the league. Obviously had the path from Canada to Southern Utah to Arizona before he started really playing with a high-level football program, but seemed to be a smooth athlete, a smooth receiving, productive player in Arizona. Can he do that at the next level?
Yeah, I mean, I figured that he would be a depth piece tight end. I know some people were higher on McLaughlin than I was, but you look at his background, 0-star recruit coming from Canada, ends up going to Southern Utah, plays there for 4 years, played wide receiver, and then kind of gained a little bit of weight, moved over to Arizona, started to play tight end. But really, you're going to use him as that big wide receiver type of a player, like that big slot, maybe that pseudo X receiver. He's not really somebody that you're going to want to put on the line of scrimmage very much. If you do, he's going to be, again, more kind of like detached from the line of scrimmage in that like wingback formation. If anything, maybe asking him to block in split zone concepts. But even that, I mean, you don't really want this guy in the trenches blocking. That's not where you're going to get that high return on investments. But he is a nice receiver. I think for his size, certainly that gives you that plus value. And you need him to play special teams as well in order for him to make the roster. So I think that's going to be the key as to when he officially makes that game day active, 53-man roster. So I think that he could be used as a good wide receiver, but he's, to me, just much more of a depth piece than somebody who's eventually going to become a starter at the position.
To your point, does he fit with all? It sounds like he would fit with all long-term.
I think so. I mean, certainly because this offense likes to make sure that they can have receiving threats basically from all angles, right? Like whether it's wide receivers, whether it's tight ends, whether it's running backs. I mean, that's when Joe Burrow was at his best at LSU. That's when he's been at his best at Cincinnati, is when he has a plethora of options to go to, because Joe's going to see things pre-snap and post-snap where he's going to be able to find the open guy. And you don't want a situation where, okay, well, I found the open guy, but he's not really the target that I want to give the ball to. You want to make sure that whoever's on the field has that ROI ability, and I think that McLaughlin does.
Oh, and they've had that. I've accused Burrow of having blindness for certain tight ends on this roster in the past, where like they're open and he just doesn't want to pull the trigger there.
Right.
So having guys that are reliable, I think, is a big deal, and they're sort of starting to build that now. I think with the depth of with adding these two guys, and I think McLaughlin having Mike Gesicki and even Tanner Hudson to learn from. Hudson being a lower end but crafty zone beating kind of tight end in Cincinnati could be helpful for his career trajectory if he does make the team, if he can't contribute on special teams. Last guy I want to talk about is Josh Newton. Trevor, a guy that you mentioned you had I think a day one grade on going into the season, and then just didn't go great for him to start the year. You mentioned the Colorado game. What were you high on coming into the season that he didn't live up to the hype?
I just overall consistency, honestly. I think that this guy's got a lot of really good athletic ability. Maybe he doesn't have quite the long speed that I thought that he did, but especially in 2022, when they were making their national title run, really competitive football player, somebody who you could play in off coverage and in press. I think he showed good ability in both. And I just think that he played with a ton of confidence in 2022. And I wonder if that Colorado game and him going up against Travis Hunter sort of really hurt the confidence for him in 2023, just because I didn't really see that same football player as the year went on. I thought it was a less than ideal game from him, but I was like, okay, well, Travis Hunter, it's a tough assignment. So, maybe he'll be able to bounce back. And he just really didn't. And corner's kind of that tough position. It's as much as it is physical, it is mental, right? Because you get beat a lot as a corner, and you've got to be able to come back and bounce back. And it just didn't feel like Josh Newton's year. So to get him where they did, I believe is a 5th round pick, that makes a lot of sense for me to get him as a depth player, as somebody who I think has starting potential. I know it's tough to say for a 5th round pick. He's certainly got to get that confidence back, but that 2022 season, Newton was awesome. And he was a fringe 1st round, late 2nd round player for me going into the year. And I don't really think that ability disappeared. Maybe he's not quite the athlete that I thought he was in 2022, but you get a guy playing as confidently as possible, he's going to give you the best he can. So to me, really nice depth piece for Cincinnati to get in the 5th round as a potential starter at that position, which you don't get to say very often.
You mentioned the long speed and obviously testing. He was in the 4.5 range, I believe. Does he play a little faster even this past year? Did he look faster on film than 4.5?
He looked faster in 2022, but I'd have told you that like in 2023, yeah, he kind of looked like somebody who you're worried about the long speed a little bit there. And I don't know if it's just because he was seeing things a lot more confidently in 2022, because let's face it, there are some other corners in this class, like Kalen Carson from Wake Forest is another one who I really liked coming into the year, because you are able to mask a little bit of athletic deficiency at the cornerback position if you anticipate really well. Like if your foot's in the ground exactly when it needs to be, or even a little bit before to see things, well, then all of a sudden on tape, it looks like you're running stride for stride with this player, when in reality, that guy might be a lot faster than you. You just got to take off a half a step before him. And at that case, and when that's the case, let's face it, 4.4, 4.5, it's 0.10 of a second difference, right? And so it's not the biggest difference in the world. And when you're able to anticipate, you can make up for that. So I just felt like he did that a lot better in 2022. And in 2023, he has adequate athleticism to be able to do that. But when you're not anticipating well, and when you're second guessing yourself, that's when you really start to see that, okay, you don't have this elite 4.3 recovery speed to make up for it. You really have to be somebody who can see it pretty well. So it might take a little bit of time for Newton, but I do have faith that he could be a good pro.
Trevor, we appreciate the time and the depth here that you've been able to give us on this Bengals draft class. You can find Trevor on the NFL Stock Exchange podcast. He's PFF's lead draft analyst. And until next time, that's going to do it for this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Thanks for listening. Hoo day, and have a good one.